Welcome, welcome. So it's 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And for those of you who have participated in our VCU ACE Lunch and Learns, this housekeeping slide will be quite familiar to you, but I'm going to go ahead and read it for those of you who have maybe not joined us in previous Lunch and Learns. So for educational and quality control, we're going to be recording our Zoom session today. By participating, you are consenting to being recorded. However, before we share this session on our VCU ACE website, we will edit to make sure that we've removed any identifying information in order to protect your privacy. And we will publish our question and answer section, which is at the end of our session, but we will remove anything that is identifiable, and it will be available as an anonymous transcript. So now that we've got that technical stuff out of the way, I'd like to welcome you guys once again to our VCU ACE Lunch and Learn for today. The topic of this session is setting the stage for learning in a virtual learning world. And that seems to be kind of where we are in November 2020. We are in a virtual learning world at this point. My name is Noelle Woolard. I am a Technical Assistance Associate with the VCU Autism Center for Excellence. And I am a parent of 4 children. I am a BCBA. I'm a special education teacher as well. And I am very excited to be joined today by my friend and co-worker, Mary Catherine. So I'm going to let her take 1 or 2 minutes or seconds to kind of introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Mary Catherine Jones, and I've had the opportunity to work with Noelle throughout the years in Lancaster County. I have 21 years as an educator, 7 years teaching, and 14 as a school administrator. I'm a BCBA, and I have experience in the elementary and also the high school levels. And as we present today, I think you'll find a lot of the tips. What I found during my time working is so many research-based strategies are great for elementary, and they can also be used for high school and also as an adult. And so you kind of want to keep that in mind as we're going through the tips. I'm also a wife and a mother of 3. And I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. So we're actually going to put a poll up just so we can kind of gauge the individuals who are participating today. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple seconds to go ahead and just describe what best describes your role. Are you a parent or a family member, a teacher, or a service provider? Because we'd like to be able to share information that's really aligned with what we know your needs might be at this point. Okay. So we have pretty much everyone that's voted, and it looks like most folks are service providers, and then teachers, and then we have some family members there. So that's great, Mary Catherine, because that's kind of what we were anticipating, and we should be able to meet their needs and give them some great suggestions that will help them.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to move on, and I wanted to share this, this quote with you. And so this quote is from the great Albert Einstein. And he states in this quote, "A clever person solves a problem, but a wise person avoids it." And so we really wanted to share this quote with you because this kind of sets up the stage for what we're hoping that you guys will get from our session today. We're going to talk about a lot of different strategies that you might be able to utilize at home as well as school, or for those of you who are service providers, you might be able to help set these up in the situations that you're in, where we can really optimize student learning. Okay, so we're going to try to do everything that we can to make our students as successful and as productive as possible. So with that being said, as soon as my screen advances, okay, we're going to go ahead and give you some tips. So we have some tips today that we'd like to share, 10 of them specifically, for setting the stage for learning in a virtual learning world. So I'm going to hand it over to Mary Catherine, and she is going to share with you the first tip.
All right, well, the first tip that we have up here on the screen, it talks about when you're setting up learning to remove temptations. And I know with virtual learning now, this is something that either as parents or as kids are coming back into the classroom, you're working with kids, you need to think about if they have that place that they're going to be able to focus and be the most productive. There are a couple of examples on the screen. One is one that a parent had made, just the poster project board, where they made it very personable and it has all the materials there for the child. The other is a desk setting. But I think too, as we look at virtual learning, it's very different, certainly at home, than it is in school, and very different from just having children come home and do their homework. You have to think about how they're going to learn for the entire day, and setting up things proactively where you're thinking about, will they engage in social relationships? Are they going to be distracted by preferred activities, maybe a cell phone or electronic device? If they're a child that is distracted easily, perhaps by a window isn't the best place to sit them. And having all of their materials ready, making sure that their area, now everyone needs a Chromebook or a laptop, making sure that plug is there so they can plug in easily if their battery dies. Also considering the flow of your normal day, because it not only has to work for your child, but it has to work for you too. And so thinking, is this an area where a lot of traffic would be? Or if you're at home, if you needed access to the kitchen table for preparing meals, is that going to be the best place for them to learn? And so I think it's very different just depending on your needs. And so the other tip is to involve your child in this. I know the examples that are up on the board, up on the screen, show where it's very personalized. You get the child excited about being able to be in their space if they have something that makes it a little more their own, and they might be more willing to engage in learning. And our next slide is tip 2, establishing the expectations for home learning. And this may be something I know as my kids have come home, I've seen a lot where the teachers have sent expectations, and it may be things such as keeping your video monitor on when you're learning, making sure that you're muted if you're not talking with the teacher, but really becoming familiar as a parent with the teacher's expecting, or if you are a teacher or a service provider, making sure you're very clear with the student what the expectations are, and being able to review those with them at the beginning of each lesson. I know for me at home with virtual learning is so different. We have to be very specific. So the dog is really a distraction. The dog has to go away during class time. The other thing that I think is really important is that you're modeling that appropriate behavior for your child. So you're doing things, you don't engage in behaviors that may distract them. So if they're online learning, you're not stopping them to ask a question, or walking behind them, that might distract other kids in class too. And as kids follow the rules that you've presented to them, and you have a visual for them, that you're giving them positive feedback at the beginning, you're telling them, laying out what you want them to do, and at the end you can say things, I really liked how you kept your video on the entire time. If they didn't do something well, maybe they were distracted and they were playing with a cell phone, you can say, next time, remember our rule, our cell phone has to go away. So I think kind of wrapping it up for them at the end. Our next slide is tip 3, and it talks about following a predictable and consistent daily schedule and making it visual. And I know even as an adult, I have a schedule that I follow, and it's a visual schedule. I still have mine in my planner. I haven't adapted well to my cell phone schedule, but I have to have something in my hands that I'm able to see how my day is going to go, and be able to check off when I accomplish different goals. And I think that visual schedule really helps students. You can have it as something that's store-bought if you wanted to. You could write it on a whiteboard. It could be something that was on a piece of paper. But I think the main idea is that a child is going to know their flow of the day. And this, if you have a whole classroom, helps the whole class, but can also really help support those individual students who need to have that predictability. So you want to include when you're going to start, they're going to have breaks. And we, as adults, we like to know if we go to a big presentation, we want to know when we're going to eat lunch and have that time to interact with our peers. And so you want to plan for those things in their daily schedule. And some children really need to see that they're checking things off. So if you have it on a whiteboard, they could check off as they go. Or if it's in a pocket chart, they could flip something over when it's completed. And so that will help them be able to keep their focus and maintain during the day. But even with that big schedule, on our next slide, tip number 4, some children really have a difficult time if it's a task that they do not want to engage in. And some examples here are breaking things into smaller steps. And there's examples of the first then, where you can tell a child that first you complete your math worksheet, and then you can maybe engage in a preferred activity like time on your cell phone or getting a snack. And this is something I think as parents and as teachers that we do all of the time. I mean, I hear myself saying, first do your math worksheet, then you can go outside. But I think what makes this different is they have that visual that they can see, and it anchors the child. And for some kids, you can have to really start small and just one step at a time. And you can build up their stamina. And so there's an example on the presentation with first, next, then, where it might be 2 activities that more about higher task demand, and then they can engage in something that's more enjoyable for them. And sometimes even as an adult, I have to think about my work. First, I'm going to do these 2 projects, and then I can go and get my lunch. One thing throughout all of the tips, you really want to make sure that you keep it simple and manageable. If it's simple for you, you're going to be able to do it. So you could even use sticky notes for something like this. Just say one sticky note, first you're going to do this, and the next, and the other sticky note, then you can engage in whatever activity they like. And then I'll turn tip 5 over to Noelle.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. I love that the tips that you provided are so proactive, and they're relatively easy to implement and put in place, and they can be differentiated for any type of learner at any level. So I really like all those different strategies. So we're going to shift a little bit and talk about tip 5, which is providing opportunities for your children to be able to check in with you. So as I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation, I was pulling up some statistics that were really specific to COVID-19 and how our kids are currently feeling with all of the changes within their schedule, the changes that they've experienced with their socialization, their sports activities, their school, and their academics. And there were several studies that I found that suggested that about 65% of our kids are really struggling at this point. And they're struggling not just with the different changes within their schedule, but they're also struggling because they're feeling isolated, and they're also feeling a little bored. 50% of our kids are feeling worried and anxious, you know, and some of these studies that I looked at are looking at really young kids who are feeling anxious at this time. So I thought tip number 5 was really important because it provided our kids an opportunity to kind of check in with us. So it provided them an opportunity to tell us, this is kind of how I'm feeling at this point in time, so that we as parents or as educators or as service providers could even match the way that we're responding to them and the types of demands or requests that we're making of them. We're matching that to how they're feeling emotionally at the time. So before I kind of talk a little bit more about this, because I have some further slides that are going to differentiate kind of how we can build this up a little bit in terms of checking in. We really need to make sure as a prerequisite that our kids understand the different emotional states. So first, we really want to make sure that they can identify them just on cards or pictures, or they can see somebody within their environment, another kid or a peer, and they can identify how that individual is feeling. So on the left-hand side, I actually found some free, I just Googled and I found some free emotion cards that can kind of help students learn these specific emotional states. Once they can identify those emotions on paper and also on their friends and peers, then we can start helping them identify when they feel that emotional state within themselves. So you can kind of see how we're building from kind of early learners and we're kind of building to more complex. So emotions first, understanding that, and then we can start building in that check-in. So going a little bit further than that, I wanted to share with you guys some different resources that you might use for some learners that are maybe a little bit older. So some feelings check-in. One of the favorite websites that I have right now is called centervention.com. And within this website, I'm going to try to take you there and kind of show you some of these examples. Hopefully my computer will participate and behave with me. Within this website, there are lesson plans that are step-by-step for educators and parents to use. There are printable resources that can be used that can provide those visuals that Mary Catherine was talking about, but can really support that feelings check-in and then help us to even build to the next level of identifying what you do when you feel these kinds of things within yourself. So I'm taking you to this website, Centervention. When you get to the website, you'll notice on the top banner here, there's different things. My favorite right here is this tab that says free resources. And I'm hoping that you guys can see that. Mary Catherine, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. So free resources. So this feelings wheel is like, I love this because it's easy, it's quick to do. If you don't have a printer, you can draw it out on a piece of paper and you can get crayons or markers and you can make it yourself. This little link here will take you to the template for the feelings wheel. And you'll notice that you have different little smiley faces that show each of those feelings. So you're getting your kid to kind of participate. They're coloring it in. You can go ahead if you're more savvy than I am, and you can put a little arrow in this little place here, and you can connect it, and the arrow can connect to each of these emotional states. Or if you're kind of low tech like I am, you can get a clothespin, and you can clothespin or paper clip the emotional state that the child is feeling. So this is a nice way for our kids to identify within themselves and then communicate to us, this is how I'm feeling at this moment in time. And why is that important? It's pretty important because then we can go ahead and we can match our behavior or our strategies or our interventions to how they are feeling at that time. Another really nice resource that I would like to quickly share with you from the same website, centervention.com, is the emotional check-in worksheet. So when you visit this specific lesson plan, you can download the emotional checklist worksheet for free. So the reason I chose this is because I felt like it was really nice because it differentiated from or it allowed the flexibility for parents and service providers and teachers to really match this to the specific individual child's level. So if you have a kid that is able to type or to write, you can type in here, how am I feeling? I am feeling good, okay? If you have a child that's not able to do that, they can simply hover over each one of these little smiley faces and choose the one that closely matches how they're feeling. So I really like that because it's something that's a permanent product that we can print out if you wanted to, but it's also something that it's available online for free. As you move further down, you've got two different columns. My favorite new activity, I like this because it kind of puts, you know, these are the things that are going really well for me, and I'm going to share that out with somebody else and write it down, and I'm going to make that something that we kind of talk about. And then also, these are the three things that I really, really miss. These are things that are, you know, maybe not going so well for me, or maybe that I'm feeling should be part of my life, but are not at this point in time. And then I really like this at the bottom. And I found that since I discovered this worksheet, I'm actually kind of doing this myself as a parent. I go to bed at night and I actually list out 3 things that I'm looking forward to about the next day. And that's something that as a parent, I'm going to probably start incorporating into conversations at dinner with my kids, just kind of helping them think about the things that are positive, you know, within the next day that we're going to have. Many days are kind of very similar day to day, you know, So moving on just a little bit more in terms of kind of thinking about the complexity of moving from understanding emotions, identifying how someone's feeling at that point in time. We have, you know, some of our kids are feeling frustrated and angry at times. So one of the lesson plans that is included as a free resource on that centervention.com website is the anger thermometer. So you'll notice at the top, 5 is red and furious, and a 1 at the bottom is green and calm. A child can quickly kind of point to each one of those different levels and communicate to us as their parent, their service provider, or their teacher, how they're feeling in the moment. It's really important because we can expand that and extend that understanding to helping those kids develop some strategies that they can implement or use when they're feeling in that emotional state. So for example, 5, I need some help. I'm red. I'm not happy. Obviously, you can tell that that red circle is very unhappy. So what are some of the things that you can do? Well, you can go ahead and ask for a break. You can count to 10. You can drink some water. So we're actually setting up different scenarios where we're teaching our kids alternate strategies that they might be able to use when they're feeling in escalated emotional states.
Noelle, I think you probably talked about this, you have talked about this, but pre-teaching that and making sure that they understand before we get into a crisis cycle definitely is important.
Yep, and I think that goes back to that quote that we talked about at the beginning, the Albert Einstein quote about preventing things, you know, and it's all, you're right, pre-teaching different strategies prior to even needing them. So that's, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to tip number 6. So this really looks at helping our students set daily and weekly goals. And so I know in my house, this is something that we've actually started doing in my school division where my kids are 100% asynchronous learning. And they, in order for us to kind of get all their activities and tasks and assignments completed, we have to, as a family, sit down the night before and kind of help them develop their schedule for the day, just like Mary Catherine had talked about in an earlier tip. But we also had to set up some goals. So these are goals that need to be accomplished before you can get on your PlayStation, before you have access to Netflix or watching movies, or before you can, you know, go and do something, you know, go out with your friends and go through the McDonald's drive-through. So assisting all of our kids in setting those daily and weekly goals is really important. So some of examples of goals, and I want you guys, as I start reading some of these, to kind of think about what is the similar thing? What is a similar component in each one of these? So let's start with academics. So I will complete 10 math problems on my worksheet in 30 minutes. I will read 1 to 2 chapters in my book in 20 minutes. I will complete all of the classwork assignments for the math teacher that has been assigned in Canvas before 2 o'clock today. So did you guys notice that I kind of paused and I kind of gave you a little bit of a hint, but I put a time limit on things. It wasn't an open-ended kind of goal. It was a goal that had a clear, it needs to be done by this point, and this is the amount of work that has to be done by this point in time. So we want to make sure that the goals that we write are measurable and objective, and they have a time limit associated with it. So some of the behavioral goals that we might consider are, I'll log into my history class on time today. I'll ask 1 question in science. This is a good one. This is one that's very specific in my home. I will put my phone in the bedroom until all of my classes are over for the day. So I have teenagers at home, so that's, you know, pretty motivating, I would say. It's a good goal. So for kids that have difficulty with structure and organization, I'll have all my books, my paper, my pencils out by 7:30 a.m. before my class begins. And then the Chromebook stuff, that's charging it. That's incredibly important. I'll plug in my Chromebook and I'll charge it before I go to bed at night. So those are all examples of easy to accomplish goals that have a clear criteria for mastery or completion. So if you have already started setting goals and that's already something that you've been doing and you want to go a step further, you might consider doing some behavioral contracts. So this is a very simple behavioral contract that I pulled from interventioncentral.org, another one of my favorite websites. But you'll notice on this, and I'm going to move my little pictures over here. You'll notice on this that this contract has 3 goals that are listed. And I want to stress that with a behavior contract, it's basically outlining what the student is going to do, what the adult is going to do, and what are the positive rewards, what are the consequences, what are the things that you get when you meet those goals, and what might happen if you don't meet those goals. But it's a contract between 2 individuals, essentially. And you want to make sure that the goals that you put on this are goals that are within the student's skill repertoire, something that they can already do pretty much 100% independently. And you want to make sure that they don't, that there are not too many goals that are unachievable. So behavior contracts are a really, really nice way to take the goals that you set and actually put them, I guess maybe build them into a contract so you have more goals that you can work out on in a short period of time. So I'm going to shift this over to Mary Catherine, and she's going to show us an example of goal setting that she's used at home personally.
So I've had the wonderful experience of virtual learning at home with my children, and it's a lot of work that they have to complete, and sometimes we get behind. And so this was an occasion where we had gotten behind on some of our assignments. So I wanted to make sure it was done in a timely manner, and I'm not at home to monitor that all of the time. And so this was an example of some goals I helped my daughter come up with. So you can see in a couple of different classes, she was missing some assignments. So I put, what classes, specifically what she had to do, created it like a checklist for her. And at the bottom of the goal, with the goal, when I was writing it, she had to complete them. I told her she had flexibility and some choice in what order they were completed in. But then I also set that criteria. She had to complete them by 12 o'clock. And some accountability with it because I'm not there with her. And so then she had to take a picture of it with her cell phone and send that to me. So I would know that those had been completed for the day. And so this is just a really simple, that morning I jotted it down on a piece of paper. And I use this at home, but also as you're working with the kids through this virtual learning, I'm sure many are behind on assignments and you have to really prioritize. And so if you're meeting with them, you can help them kind of at least get things in more manageable bites. And then they can sort of see that they can check those items off their list. Because I think if you say, oh, go catch up, or if I had told my daughter, well, just do what's there on the Canvas platform, just do what's in Canvas, more than likely she would not have completed it all. And so the kids do need that support in trying to prioritize, having that deadline, and then that accountability piece from the adults. So I just wanted to share that. I felt like that was something that worked well for her to try to catch up.
And I particularly love this example because it didn't take a lot of materials. You've got a piece of paper. You could probably even use a scrap piece of paper and write things out. And your handwriting is much better than mine. So, but thank you for sharing that example. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit and talk about student self-monitoring. So this is like just another extension kind of what we talked about with checking in, identifying emotions, emotional regulation, matching your behavior or your strategies that you implement based on how you're emotionally feeling. So many upper elementary and middle school students do really well with student self-monitoring. So it's a way for kids to be able to monitor their own behavior with minimal assistance from an adult or a teacher or a parent. So some of the targets that might be very applicable for learning at home or even school is monitoring whether or not a student monitoring whether or not they start work in a timely manner, or they complete a work assignment, or if they remain in their work area, or if they work quietly without calling out across the room. So one of the resources that I wanted to share with you from interventioncentral.org is this amazing checklist. So it is called the Self-Check Behavior Checklist Maker. Okay. So Mary Catherine, can you see that right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go onto this, website and you look for the self-monitoring, self-check behavior checklist maker, click on the blue tab. Let's see if it'll take me there. Let's see. And it did. Well, hello. Okay. So I love this because you actually have a drop-down menu of the different types of skills or tasks when you kind of break it down that you might want to include within your self-monitoring checklist. So I'm going to go ahead and do when taking a quiz or test, because all of our kids are doing this, whether or not they're in school or they're at home. I'm going to choose that. So it populates these different things that are part of a student taking a test. So I look over the test at the start and decide how much time to spend on each section. I'm going to click that arrow and it pulls it over to my checklist. I'm giving my full attention to working on a test. I'm not talking, and I use any extra time that I have. So one of the things that I really liked about this is that you can edit. You can go ahead and edit the response. So, you know, my kids are home right now, so there's no students around them, but they do have their siblings around them. So I'm not talking to other, I'll put siblings, okay? So then I go and apply, and it actually changes the language on that checklist. So you scroll down a little bit further, very user-friendly. I want check boxes, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to preview what this would look like in a PDF. And look how fabulous that is. We have already created a self-check behavior checklist maker that is specific to a specific situation, a specific activity within the day for a specific kid. So I really encourage you to kind of go on interventioncentral.org and look at all of those free, amazing resources specific to self-monitoring. Okay, and so for even like a different way to do some self-monitoring, this is an example of a student who was in a classroom setting, and it happened to be a student in middle school who was on the autism spectrum, and he was very truthful about how he thought his behavior was. So he was a perfect candidate for this. So his target behavior was to stay seated and not call out or yell out across the room for 4 out of the 6 time slots. So you'll notice over here, the first time slot is 11:04. The time begins at 9 o'clock. Each one of these intervals is 5 minutes. So this student actually had a little timer that was sitting at his desk, and every 5 minutes it would go off, and he would actually mark whether or not he thought himself to stay seated and not call out. And so he had a goal that was built into this target behavior. And we also had the teacher that was completing this when he didn't know it 1 time a week, just to check for fidelity. So it's, again, a nice way for many of our students to kind of be able to identify how they're doing on some of their specific behavioral goals as well. Okay.
So our next tip, tip 8, talks about rewards and frequent encouragement. And one thing about rewarding and encouraging, you want to be very proactive. You really want to front load a lot of things. And so being able to determine what your child wants or would like to work for, that's a really a good use of time. So you'll know how to build that into their day. And behaviors happen either to get something or to get away from something. But once you know what a child wants, you can use that. Sometimes it's really great to ask them, because sometimes they'll surprise you on what they're willing to work for. I remember when I was teaching and I'd asked one of my students what they wanted to work for, and their thing they wanted to do was at the end of the day, erase the boards and wash them. That was back when we had chalkboards. And so I would not necessarily have thought about that. Or one was cleaning off the bookcase. They really like things neat. And so we were able to build that into a award, and that was actually good for me too. You want to think about how often your child needs something, and you want to think about your levels of rewards, because you can't always give the top desired activity, every single time. And so they might like attention. For younger kids, they may like stickers, maybe a little break, maybe going outside. And so you want to think about how you can build those in and maybe work up to that larger reward. And it's really individually based and based on age and the needs. And not all rewards and motivators are created equally. Just because one of my children really loves to watch movies, my other child isn't interested in the movies. She'd rather go outside. And so you really have to look at that individual child, or older child, to determine what the best reward would be. So we've given you some tips, and we've talked about things you could do proactively. The next slide talks about attention. And so if your child is motivated by attention, they're going to get it whether you give it to them proactively on your terms, or whether you do not give them attention and they really want it, they start to work, and then they'll engage in behaviors and keep upping the ante in order to gain attention, which may not always be positive attention for them. So you really want to meet that need. If you know that your child really loves attention, just meet that need at the beginning. And so you might want to provide them an extra 2 to 3 minutes of attention prior to independent work, if you know independent work is something that they're going to struggle with. And during that time, it's a great time to check for understanding. We talked about in the first tip, reviewing your rules. First and second tip, reviewing your schedules and your rules. And attention can be verbal or nonverbal. Sometimes it's something you say to them, or it might just be a wink or a thumbs up from a distance. And so that's something that is easy to give to provide an outcome that we want. We always want to do it strategically on our terms instead of, after a behavior occurs. We'll get more of what we want. The next slide, tip 9, is providing opportunities for choice. And this is really focused, the other was attention, but some kids may not want attention. They may want to escape doing something. And so we have to come up with strategies that help them, maybe give them some opportunities for a little bit of escape. And so these are some examples of some choice boards, maybe a bingo card where they might have academic tasks that they need to do, maybe some harder things along with some easier things. And then also maybe some things that they could enjoy on there. And you can set up opportunities for choice in many different ways, the bingo card, or even if you go back to the example I provided when I set up that goal for my daughter, I offered her choice. She could finish that list any order she wanted to. The main idea was that she finished it in a timely manner. All right.
Okay.
Turn it over to Noelle for our next tip.
The last and final tip, and I think this is probably one of the most important tips that we have to kind of think about and consider as parents, and as individuals who are also holding down full-time jobs and trying our best to really juggle all of the different variables that are presented with us. But the first 9 tips really focused on how we can proactively support our students and our children. But tip number 10 is incredibly important because it talks about how we can support ourselves and we can make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. Because if we're not doing okay as adults within this situation, no one else is going to do okay either. So some of the things that I was thinking about that I've not written about, but read about that are specific to self-care for adults and teachers are actually very similar to some of the tips that we talked about for our students. So the first one being, make sure that you have a schedule for yourself. If you're a parent that's working from home and balancing a full-time job, most likely sitting in front of a computer, and your children are also home learning as well, make sure you have a schedule set up for both of you, and make sure that that schedule includes time for breaks. and it includes time getting out of your home. So that could be taking a walk with your dog, or taking a bike ride, or even just going and sitting outside, you know, in a chair and just kind of getting some good vitamin C or vitamin D. Just go out and take a deep breath and take a break from the things you do each and every single day. I know personally that I have some friends here. One of them is this tea, my Sleepy Time Immune Booster tea, and then this tea. These are things that I actually, you know, this is one thing that I look forward to every evening, is having a nice cup of tea and kind of taking a deep breath and walking away from my computer and my work. Another thing to kind of think about is think about mindfulness. Think about taking deep breaths and actually spending time doing nothing. And many of us, I think, on this Zoom today are women. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many women who just sit and do nothing. You know, we never kind of give ourselves an opportunity to kind of just be. So something else to kind of think about. And then finally, you know, many of us are isolated at this point. We might be working at home full time. We may not be seeing our friends in the same way that we were before COVID-19 hit. We're not having those opportunities to socialize, but we can still create structures around us that provide some socialization so that we can still have opportunities to connect with other adults. So that is our last tip. Tip 10, make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of those around you. So I'm going to shift next and just kind of share with you some of the links and the resources that we shared today. Interventioncentral.org was one of the ones that Mary Catherine and I really like. We also really like centervention.org, pbisworld.com, and of course, the VCU Autism Center website.
So, okay, now I guess we'll open it for questions, and I'll look for the chat for anybody who's posted questions. Already, Mary Kay had expressed that she really liked some of the tools that you all have shared.
Thank you.
I mean, it was a session packed full of information.
Yes, and those websites are amazing. And if many of you have not had a chance to go through the VCU Autism Center.org website, you really need to go and take a look, because we've added a tremendous amount of resources over the last several weeks, several months. And I know for me, I go on that website every couple days, and there's always something new on there that I didn't even know that was going to be put on the website. And that is, I work for the Autism Center, so.
Thank you for that commercial break, Noelle. Diane says great information. Also another comment about liking the tools. Kim in particular liked the behavior checklist, that you can share that link for adapting the checklist. Do you have that, Noelle?
Mary Catherine, can you pull it up? If I do that, it's going to take my screen share off.
Sure. Okay.
I think it's under the self-monitoring. I think it's the second link in the self-monitoring tip. But I will tell you, if we can't find it quick enough for you, if you go to interventioncentral.org, there is a search bar within that website, and you can go ahead and you can search behavior checklist or self-monitoring. That website is pretty awesome, because it will give you the evidence base for all of the different strategies that they talk about. And then they also give you links for different resources that other teachers and parents have created that you can access for free. So I really like that.
No, I have it. Did you want, how did you, I
Can
guess.
you put it in the chat?
Post it in the chat.
Okay.
Mary Catherine and Noelle, do you have any ideas on how to tie these great resources in with school-wide idea to increase motivation and engagement across all students?
Yes, so Mary Catherine and I talked about that specifically in depth this week. And we felt that many of the strategies that we were talking about were antecedent-based or preventative, and they were tier 1 interventions. And we really felt that those things had to be in place in order for us to kind of expand and talk about motivation. So the motivation piece that we hoped you guys kind of got today from our session was really focusing on setting goals. We talked some about making sure that your reinforcers or your motivators are differentiated to your learner and making sure that they're kind of worth what your learner is expected to do. And then that can also be built in, motivation can be built into your self-monitoring checklist that we talked about. So we felt like before we could really talk about improving motivation and making sure kids are getting online and completing work, we had to talk about all the other nuts and bolts that were really essential for setting the stage for that kind of successful environment.
Perfect. Diane just added, in light of what you were just saying, Diane posted that she liked the goal setting by the kids. And for everyone on the Zoom, Mary Catherine has posted the intervention checklist on the chat bar.
So can I go ahead and advertise our next Lunch and Learn topic? You
can. You are doing the commercials here today. Go, Noelle.
So next week, we're going to have April and Crystal, and they're actually doing a Lunch and Learn topic on transitioning from school to work. So if you're interested in signing up for that amazing Lunch and Learn session, you can go to our website. There's a banner that will kind of go through, and you can go there and register, or you could go ahead and follow this link, or we can put this link in the chat as well.
The link is in the chat right now.
Perfect.
And I can tell you that April and Crystal are just really two young, talented, smart women, experts.
It's going to be an excellent session. I'm quite sure of it.
All right. Well, thank you, Noelle. Thank you, Mary Catherine. I appreciate your time.
Thank you guys so much. It was great to be able to be with all of you. And thanks, Mary Catherine.
Yeah, thanks, Noelle.
You're a great co-presenter. And we'll see you guys at later Lunch and Learn sessions. Have a great week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.